As a new gardener, nothing frustrated me more than walking out in the morning and finding that something had taken a bite out of one of my plants. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of gardening. But as a new gardener, you don't necessarily know what you're going to have to deal with. And I really had no idea since I was doing an apartment garden in full shade in the middle of the city. All I knew is I had squirrels around that might dig up my carrots, but I didn't really have any idea what else might happen. So these are all the pests I had in my garden and how I dealt with them in my first season of gardening. So my first pest is a little bit more of a PSA because it didn't cause me any real problems. But this is the Bagrata bug. Now the Bagrata bug is specific to the southwest US. In the other parts of the country you might know its cousin, the Harlequin bug. But both of these bugs are attracted to alyssum. If you grow tomatoes, you might know alyssum is a good companion plant because it attracts parasitic wasps that help deal with the hornworms. But alyssum is also attracting these Bagrata or Harlequin bugs. Now they don't do damage to the alyssum itself, but they will migrate from the alyssum onto your brassicas. So your broccoli, your cabbage, your cauliflower, all of those things. Now the good news is I didn't see these until later in the summer, so I think they would only affect fall planted brassicas. But I had actually never heard of these bugs before, period, which is why I wanted to mention them. My next big pest is a garden classic, and that is grasshoppers. The good news is they didn't really devastate my garden, but they did go after one specific plant, which was my pineapple sage. And honestly, I thought fragrant herbs were supposed to deter pests, so if you know why they went after it, please leave a comment. But they just devastated this thing. I was able to save a few cuttings, but they just took the plant completely down. And once they were done with it, they just kind of left. The next bug I had to deal with was spider mites. I know, not a bug, technically. They're those little red dots you might see running around, and in small numbers they don't really do any damage. But if they get out of control like they did on my plants, they will absolutely suck them dry. Now again, fortunately, they didn't really kill my tomatoes until the end of the season, so I got most of the harvest done anyways. But the thing to know here is to maybe not follow some standard gardening advice if you live in a dry climate like LA. A lot of people will say never water your tomatoes from the top, because that gets the leaves wet, and if the leaves get wet, you have to deal with mold and diseases, and it's just a big issue. But watering plants from the top is a great way to get rid of spider mites. It washes them away, and they just never really get out of control. The thing is, since I was in a super dry climate, we didn't get any rain for like the entire gardening season. So none of those spider mites ever got displaced. Just a PSA, if you are in a dry place, maybe water from the top every once in a while. I don't think it will hurt that much. The next pest I had to deal with is another garden classic, the cabbage moth / cabbage worm. If you ever see these little white butterfly looking things floating around your garden and they got a little black dot on their wings, they are the devil. Get rid of them. What they're doing is they're flying around your plants and laying their eggs on the underside of the leaves. Once those eggs hatch, the caterpillars will just eat all of your brassicas, which is why they're called the cabbage worm. The best way I found to deal with them is to just check the underside of the leaves like twice a week, because it takes the eggs 7 days to hatch. If you find any eggs, just scrape them off. And if you see any damage to any of the leaves, you can know that you can just find the caterpillars down there. They start off really small though, so sometimes it takes a little getting used to. Now, enemy number 2 on the list of garden pests I had to deal with was aphids. They first showed up on my blueberries, but then quickly migrated to my brassicas, my radishes, and even my garlic, which I didn't even think was possible, because garlic is supposed to deter pests. It turns out, garlic has a specific aphid that are these little black ones that it will attract on its own, and so I had multiple different types of aphids in my garden. Now, I did finally get a routine down with neem oil that did get rid of them. But before that, they did take out one of my broccolis, and it was just a bit of a mess. And then finally, the number 1 pest I had to deal with actually made me really angry. You see, I was trying to plant lentils as like my special crop for the season. I was really excited to try to grow them and to see how it all turned out. One day, I just walk outside, and I see all my little lentil plants had been chopped off near the base, just like ripped. Now at first I thought it might be a squirrel because they were nearby and it looked like something it might have done. But as I was in the garden watching, a little bird flew by and yanked another one right out of the ground. It was one of those little annoying sparrows that you see all over the city that are begging for food at restaurants, things like that. And the thing was, it didn't eat my baby lentil plants. It was tearing them out to make a nest. And when I found this out, I thought, okay, that's not too bad. I guess I can deal with some baby birds. But it turns out these birds were the worst nest builders or worst parents in the world, because after they tore out all of my lentil plants, they then laid eggs in this nest, and they dropped right through to the cement floor and broke it open. All my lentils killed for nothing. I don't know, that really got me more than anything else. That was my most emotionally invested issue throughout everything, because at least all the other pests kind of left me something to deal with. Like, I still had broccoli, I still had onions, I still had tomatoes, but my lentils were gone. So just a heads up, birds will pick your plants to build their nest with if you're not careful. So if you're also in an apartment garden situation, I hope this list was helpful or insightful, and maybe you can prepare in some ways to deal with these kind of problems yourself. And if you like this video, check out these videos on how I actually got my garden started.